Do you find yourself watching a lot of TV shows and series on your free time? Don't worry, so do I. And not only I, but a lot of people on the internet. If you think about TV shows and movies that have gotten a lot of recognition and popularity in recent years, then most of these were probably shows that you found or at least heard of on the internet due to them finding a lot of recognition online. However, one show recently did this to an unexpectedly impressive level, and that was a Japanese anime by the name of Frieren, Beyond the Journey's End. Frieren ended up knocking the immensely popular anime Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood off its spot as the most popular anime on the popular website MyAnimeList, which only a few series has done prior to it. But with how popular Frieren is, you might wonder why I considered this surprising. So let me explain why. When you think about fantasy shows in the current day landscape, what do you normally think? Let me guess. Was it perhaps of a story about an epic adventure? Or maybe a power fantasy story? Well, what you most probably did not think of was a story about the journey after the epic adventure or power fantasy. A story about how someone who can live for over 1,000 years perceives time and learns how to come to terms with it and understand their emotions. To come to terms with that, people that they hold dear come and pass as if they only lived for what feels like potentially a few months of your life for you as a viewer or me as a person writing this script, who will most probably not live close to 1,000 years, probably more so a tenth of that, if we're lucky. That is what Frieren tries to tell us. Frieren isn't your typical power fantasy or epic adventure fantasy story. It's a personal story. One about an elf who has to come to terms with and learn to treasure things in a life where everyone around her lives an entire lifetime in what feels like no time at all to her. Most people look for something thrilling and exciting when they look for a fantasy story. So normally it would be fully expected for a slow-paced drama show taking place in a fantasy setting to be completely overlooked. So what happened? Why did Frieren, out of everything, end up becoming so popular against all the odds? Well, the answer is probably a lot simpler than you think. To begin with, it wasn't against all odds, but rather the exact opposite, even if you might not think so. How many times have you thought something and thought, oh, this is just X show but with Y aspect added to it? I can tell you I have a lot of times. I recently read through Solo Leveling for the first time, and whilst I loved it, and I'm not someone who tends to love power fantasies, I actually tend to dislike them quite a lot. I remember just telling my friends, hey, this is exactly what's gonna happen, isn't it? And there are people who has already read it, and they just kind of went, I mean, you're not wrong. And that is fine in certain aspects, but sometimes, at least for me, I want something more interesting. I struggle with a lot of fantasy shows nowadays, because I think a lot of them tend to be very bland and tend to struggle with showing an interesting aspect to their worlds. If you think about it, you could probably add that description that I made earlier to most popular fantasy shows, which is partially why Frieren became so popular. It was simply something new, a new flavor or a breath of fresh air. Adding that and combining it with amazing character writing, phenomenal although slowly paced story, amazing world building and character dynamics, it makes the show into something truly special. On top of that, the fact that the show could from one moment go from being hilarious and amazing with some of the greatest and funniest moments I've seen in a very long time. To going into something that's just gut-wrenching and just sad. Something that makes you almost cry at times. It's not a happy story all of the time. It has its happy moments and it has its sad moments. It really tries to, in a way, show perspectives of life. You know, life tends to sometimes have phenomenal moments, but sometimes also very sad moments. And it's something we all have to go through. And I think that's what Frieren really tries to tell us. And sometimes we also look over a relationship or think of something that we didn't quite understand or appreciate to the level that we maybe should have. There are few shows that can go from 0 to 100 so often and so consistently whilst not dipping in quality, which is something else that also makes media such as Frieren so wonderful. All of this combined with an amazing soundtrack, wonderful openings, the first one called Yusha, or The Brave in English, by YOASOBI, which I personally enjoy the most out of any of their songs. And the second opening, Haru, or Sunny in English, by Yorushika. I don't know if I pronounced that right, my bad if I didn't. Which I like just as much, if not more. Anytime, Anywhere by Milet is also a fantastic ending theme, which fits the show's vibes so incredibly well. And God, that song has been on repeat on my Spotify and Apple Music. With all of this, as well as having some really popular content creators, such as the popular YouTuber Gigguk, having already talked about the manga adding to the hype, it piques people's interest even further, making it so that even more people will end up checking the show out once it releases. That is, honestly, in my opinion, simply why Frieren ended up becoming so popular, even though it was pretty unexpected. Frieren was something different, something that could easily have fallen off and failed, but due to the show's phenomenal writing, wonderful characters, acting, world building, and the beautiful accompanying music pieces, followed by bringing an aspect to the fantasy shows that most other fantasy media fails to bring to it, in the drama and feelings in which the show dwells in. Frieren is truly something special, and it is clear why it has been so successful to me, and I am excited to see what's to come next with the show, with its future seasons, and as well as the manga, because I've been reading that too after watching the show. For now, what we have is truly a masterpiece, and one I will at least think of highly and hold dear to my heart for a long time. It has affected many, so let's all just appreciate that. This wonderful show and how nice it is. Sometimes things aren't meant to last forever, and I think that's something that makes me, in a way, appreciate a lot of things. And I think that's also why shows like this is something we should appreciate while we can. With all of that, thank you for watching this video, and have a great rest of the day.